Hey folks, my name is Jen, and yeah, today we're gonna be talking about everything that I read in February. If I'm a little bit low energy, I apologize. February's been a month. Try to get more excited while I'm talking about what I read. I actually read 18 books in February, which is pretty good. I won't say that I don't read this much in a month all the time, because there's been a couple of years where I've read a lot in a month, but yeah, 18 books doesn't always happen. Some of them are quite short though, so that's probably adding to why I read this much. So I am today, guys, I just cannot. My memory card is having trouble. Fucking hope that I recorded the rest of that pretty well. I was trying to adjust my camera back and this snapped off of my tripod, so I wish this was vodka. Where were we? I don't even remember. I don't think I even really talked about this. Okay. I was trying to talk about was If Beale Could Talk by James Baldwin. I finished reading this. I started this months ago. Stopped reading because it was getting a little bit heavy. Went back to it this month. Oh, it's very heavy book. This is following two young people, Tish and Fawny. It is told through the eyes of Tish, who is a 19-year-old girl who is pregnant with Fawny's child. Fawny, her fiance, has just been falsely accused of a terrible crime and imprisoned. And shit's bad, you guys. It is bad. We're talking racism. We're talking, there's some sexual assault here and there as well. There's some abuse. There's a lot of stuff going on in here. You got, I guess, a little bit of classism, or maybe it's more religious religious classism, something like that. Fawny's dad is pretty chill, but Fawny's mother and his sisters are really nasty, and don't like Tish and don't approve of her and her family because they're not solid churchgoers, and you know, that's same old noise. And so stuff's really rough. Let me tell you, if Fawny's mother and sisters were on fire, I would not piss on them to put them out. I can tell you that right now. Awful bitches. This book is pretty solidly full of awful people. There's the cop who arrested Fawny. That's a whole complicated thing. There's a lot of underlying things that go on in that. I don't want to fully go into that because more is revealed as the book goes along. But I like to kick him in the teeth too. This book is pretty populated by pretty awful people, and then you have pretty good people who are trying to stop bad things from happening in this book and try to fix things, and it just kind of feels like things aren't gonna work out. Nothing's gonna work out. Everything is bleak. I think the book tries to end on like a hopeful note, but I didn't take it to be hopeful at all. I took it to be pretty hopeless, and everything is terrible and is bleak. I don't know if that's exactly what James Baldwin was going for. I will say it hits you with a heavy dose of reality, especially reality at this time period, which was the 50s, I believe. No, the 70s. This is in 1974. Oh god, it's even sooner. But, yeah, I'd say it's the reality in the 70s, the reality now. Just overall, yeah, I feel like I'm not selling this book really well to anyone. I think that Man, it's worth a read. It's definitely worth a read. James Baldwin's writing is very beautiful. It also can be very stark. I have a lot of pages bent down because of profound things that were said in here. And he creates really interesting characters. A lot of them are very nuanced. I I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I've taken the dive into Baldwin's works. I just will say that if you are mentally not in a place for a bleak work, I still think you should read it, but maybe wait until you're feeling a little bit lighter up here, in here, because this is rough. Yeah, like I said, very important, very worth a read. There is a reason, I think, why this is one of his biggest works, and very well done. But it is rough going. Yeah, it's a rough time. Yeah, I ended up giving this what did I give this? I gave this 4 stars. The other classic I read was, I actually did a reread of The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I wasn't planning on doing a reread of this. I just felt like I needed it. This is a book, in case you didn't know. It's following Mary Lennox, who is this little girl. She was born in India. She's very neglected by her parents. They basically didn't want her, didn't care about her, left her to be raised by their servants, and told the servants to basically cater to her every whim. So she's grown up kind of neglected, yet also tyrannical. She's a spoiled brat, but she's like deeply unhappy, and she overall doesn't do well with the climate of India. I think it's a little too hot for her, and so she's also been pretty sickly the entire time. And a bout of cholera basically takes out most people at the compound where she lives, and she is found alone and sent to Yorkshire in England to live at the big old Misselthwaite Manor on the moors, which is the house owned by her uncle's family. He's not actually, I think, related to her by blood, actually. His wife was the sister of Mary's father, and avoids the house a lot of the times, but he has put aside that she is to come live there, to be taken care of, to be given things, to be educated, and all that. And Mary arrives and kind of finds herself also sort of neglected again. Nobody really has time for her, although she's not really a charwoman, is she? I think kind of that kind of position. She's a younger housekeeper in the servant girl in the house, and she's kind of been put there to help Mary with the basics, and she's kind to her, but also tells her like it is, like, yo, you gotta dress yourself. You can't dress yourself? Dang, my 4-year-old sister can dress herself, kind of a thing. Just kind of a dose of reality, Mary does. But it's this big old manor, and she's not really allowed to go in a lot of places. A lot of the doors to the rooms are locked. There's barely anyone there besides the servants. There's mysterious cries in the hallway. And there's also the moors and the gardens that are half dead because she arrives before spring appears. And Mary and her going outside starts to change. She starts to like people. She finds people that she likes. She finds a joy in being outside in nature, and also learns about a garden, a secret garden that has been locked behind walls, and vows that she is going to find it. Loved this book the first time I read it. I did not grow up reading this. I had watched a couple of the adaptations when I was growing up, but I hadn't actually read the book until, I don't know, was that 2020? 2019, 2020, sometime like that. Read it for the first time as an adult, absolutely adored it. I read it for the first time in spring, And that was something, I will say, to feel like you're reading about the gardens and everything coming to life along with Mary, and kind of experience that yourself during the season. It's pretty great. This is a pretty charming read. I think what I really like about it is the character growth, and I also really like that while this does have a moralistic tone here and there that it takes with people, it's also not necessarily saying that Mary or another character that she meets later on who's also spoiled, it's not saying that they're like bad children. The author goes out of her way to explain why these kids got this way, and it's because of basically not being given a chance by a lot of people, being neglected in different ways. Like their immediate wants, physical wants, are taken care of for the most part, but their emotional wants, their mental wants have not really been catered to, taken care of, are catered to in the wrong ways, always being given everything they want, instead of being taught, well, sometimes you don't get the things and sometimes you do, and this is just, being raised correctly, I guess, is what I'm trying to get across. Yeah, it doesn't go out of the way to do, like, I guess what sometimes more moralistic tales or like fairy tales or older books from the day would be like, well, they're gonna come to a bad end because of how awful they are. It kind of gets into, yeah, they're pretty awful, but these are the reasons why they're pretty awful, and they also deserve the chance to be given chances to evolve and grow and find out more about themselves and find that they do actually like people. There are things that they enjoy doing. And a very big focus also on being outside in nature, exercising in nature, taking in the fresh air of Yorkshire, and being out on the moors and being outside and battling the wind that comes sweeping through, and all of this stuff. Very big emphasis on that, very big emphasis on kids being allowed to use their imagination and run around, stuff like that, and I found that to be also enjoyable then and enjoyable now. I will say not so many good things as far as like opinions on India or the folk of India. Really, those are a couple of there's not that many instances of that in the book, but there's a couple, and it's just a little bit jarring and kind of not great at the same time, but in the context of when this was set and when this was written, it's kind of par for the course. Kind of ideology. Is that the right word I'm looking for? No. Viewpoint? Point of view. Point of view of the time. That's what I'm going for. Which is unfortunate. But again, that's an older book. That's that time period. But other than that, I think pretty good book. Enjoyed the reread. And yeah, I think I scored it originally 4 stars, and I didn't change that rating. It's still 4 stars. Mystery I read this month was The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side by Agatha Christie. This is a Jane Marple mystery, and there's a gathering at this rich actress's house, and a witness there sees the actress's face change at one point in a conversation, and the witness kind of says that her face took on, she references The Lady of Shalott by Tennyson. The mirror cracked from side to side, the curse has come upon me, cried the Lady of Shalott. Probably has better context if you've read The Lady of Shalott. Honestly, I probably should have reread the poem. I have not read that in years. But there's a lot more context behind that. It's discussed a little bit in here when characters are trying to describe what they mean by saying how the actress's face looked at that time. and a short while later, someone dies suddenly at this gathering. And everything is kind of described to Miss Marple, and she takes an interest in things and tries to help solve the case as she does. I really enjoyed this. I think this was a little bit different than other Marples I've read before, just in that it felt a little bit more twisty-turny. And I mean, it's Christie gets like that. But the Miss Marples don't really, I feel like, take as many twists and turns as, say, a Poirot or some of the standalones and things like that. And I really liked how things kind of went along. And I also really liked that I was blindsided by the ending. There was at one point where I thought I knew who done it, and I was correct. But again, I could not come up with a full thing. I thought I knew the potential motive, but which I was also correct on, but I didn't get like the full everything, you know, the how, the when, the whole, that kind of jazz. Yeah, I'm still kind of ultimately surprised by the ending and the solution and stuff like that, but I really enjoyed this. This was a very enjoyable read, very fast-paced, and Miss Marple is like, hers can feel a little bit more slow burn, but this felt, well, I guess more medium-paced. It's a small English village and all of that, but very enjoyable, like I said, very twisty-turny, recalled characters that we've seen before, learned some new characters, found very interesting, and I love Miss Marple. I think she's absolutely brilliant. She's just great overall. So yeah, this was like 5 stars. Apologies, it is now later, so the lighting is different and kind of sucks more. I had the graphic novels to talk about last. So the first graphic novel that I read this month was Mooncakes, and this is by Wendy Xu, Suzanne Walker, and Jomette Gill. This is telling the story of young teen witch Nova as she goes into the nearby woods to follow the reports of a white wolf and discovers that it is her childhood friend and crush, a werewolf named Tam, who has basically shown up again and is battling a horse demon. She helps her out, and there's like a rekindling kind of romance going on, and then there's also evil forces that are hoping to use Tam's werewolf magic and kind of take it, so they're trying to figure out how to stop these evil forces and things like that. This was a very interesting book. I initially really liked the art of everything. I really think the art is really cool. I initially really liked all the characters and the beautiful like colors and various things. I really like the representation in here. Everybody is like, it's very diverse cast. Tam is non-binary, Nova is partially deaf, so she wears hearing aids, and then let's see, Nova's grandmothers are a lesbian couple. It's a very like diverse, well-rounded cast. They talk about mooncakes a bit in here. It seems like it's a mix of like Asian and potentially Jewish traditions. I was a little confused by the some of the ritual things, because it seemed like it was possibly a mix of things. but it was still really cool to see. And yeah, I really, like I said, I really liked the art. I really liked a lot of like the colors, the mysticalness. There's a whimsical kind of side to it, most with like the spirits, like the forest spirits of the nearby woods. Actually, those kind of forest spirits reminded me of the little imaginary like sprites and friends of the main character in Seance Tea Party. So I thought that was like really cool. And overall, I thought the story was pretty cute. Or the romance was pretty cute anyway. Things got a little bit confusing though. I will say that much. As far as besides the romance and besides also the character growth of Nova, I think a lot, like her magic and things, and trying to move past like things that have happened in the past. I think I think those were fairly strong or stronger than the ultimate conflict of this book, which was the evil entities wanting the werewolf magic power and thing like that. And I think the only reason I struggled with that was because it just wasn't clearly explained enough. Werewolves. So you think of werewolves as, you know, it's a curse. Now they're kind of, it's like shape-shifting. It's you know, they're cursed at the full moon to turn into their wolf form, and some legends say they have some control and some legends say they don't, and there's varying legends as to why this happens, and like different whatever, it all folklore, different kinds of things like that. I have never once heard a story that tried to go into depth about werewolf magic. It hasn't really seemed overall like the lycanthropy is seen as a magic thing, even though it's normally in like fantasy supernatural. It seems to usually be seen as some kind of curse thing, as some kind of like thing that's handed down through the bloodline, or through bite, things like that. It's not normally referenced as like they have any special abilities other than the shape-shifting, which mostly seems to be out of their control. So I guess what would have helped this story a lot would have been to explain more. But the story says multiple times that, well, we don't understand, well, we don't understand, well, we don't understand. And it's like, but that, to me, that kind of felt like an ultimate cop-out in this story overall. To just kind of say, well, we don't understand, and just leave it at that, but then expect me to buy that an evil group wants this, like going in depth about they want Tam's werewolf magic. They want what makes Tam, what makes Tam a werewolf. They want all of that kind of thing, but they don't. It's like, what do they want? They want their blood, their soul, their essence. What the fuck is it that do they want of Tam's? And they don't really go into that, and like I said, just kind of say, well, we don't understand. And it's like, I don't know if the writers of this were trying to be more ambiguous about things, but I felt like it was kind of a disservice overall to the story to not fully understand why this is considered magic, what the magic entails, what is all of it, what does that have to do with anything, why, more in depth about why this is wanted, and that kind of thing. It just, it felt a little bit not, it felt a little bit confusing and not well explained enough, and it just could have been gone into depth more. There could have been more explanation, there could have been more that was gone into overall. So yeah, I think it was a disservice to this to not explain more and to not give more context, and That's ultimately what brought what was a fairly enjoyable read down to just a 4, because I just could not get over the fact that I didn't understand half of the shit that was going on. And it's a cute story. Otherwise, like, the relationships are cute. I enjoyed, like, the families and the friendships and the art of it, and that is what left it at a 4, was because of all of that. But overall, the rest of it was just kind of confusing and not very satisfying, which was a kind of a disappointment. And then I also read the entirety of the Amulet series. So the Amulet series is by Kazuki Buishi. It is a 9-book series. I read 1 through 8 like a year or so ago. So the final book, book 9, just came out. So I reread 1 through 8 and then read book 9 to finish off the series. This series is following Emily and Naveen a couple of years before tragedy struck, and now their family, and now Emily, Naveen, and their mother have moved towns. In fact, it seems like they might have moved a great distance away, to get away from the past and start over. And they're starting over in the home of their great-grandfather. It's a home that was passed down to their mother, and they're just looking to, yeah, like I said, start over, fix the house up, start a new life there. But the very first night they're there, they hear a weird noise. They go to investigate, and this terrifying creature captures their mother and drags her through the basement and through a portal into another world, essentially. And Emily and Naveen follow to rescue her and find that there is more to this world than meets the eye. They have been pulled into a place where magic exists, terrifying creatures exist. There is a kind of war, essentially, that's been going on. There's corruption, there's just a world in shambles, and they find that they have also inherited some things from their great-grandfather, namely an amulet, which would make them, mostly Emily, a stonekeeper, which is a person with great power. So this series basically follows them on their journey of, like, the growth, like character development of the both of them, and trying to fix things, getting involved within this world and trying to fix things and set things right, and ultimately be able to go home again. So I loved this series the first time I read it. I really loved it this time as well. I'll try to show you some of the artwork because it is just simply gorgeous. It's their great-grandfather's actual house in this world. So book 1 is The Stonekeeper. Book 2 is The Stonekeeper's Curse. There's some artwork from it. I'll try to show you an art piece from each that hopefully doesn't spoil anything. There's The Cloud Searchers, and my favorite character, which is Leon. Love him. And I do like Emily. I absolutely adore her little brother Naveen. Here, that looks pretty cool. Yeah, there's like a steampunk, there's like a cyberpunky stuff. There's like mechs involved, mechs are quite honestly not my thing. The only giant robot stuff I actually like is like the Zords from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, because that's what I grew up with. I like Big O, which is this old anime series that is like kind of basically what if Batman was in a weird a more dystopian place that had giant robots, kind of a deal to it. It isn't interesting yet. I have not watched it in years, but I like that. So otherwise I'm not super big into mechs, giant robots, things like that. That's not really my thing. But I thought they were pretty cool in this series, and I really liked this series. But yeah, here's book 4, The Last Council. 5, Prince of Elves. I hate that creature. Unfortunately, there's something called mountain giants in here, and they are basically like spiders with gremlin tops. I really can't stand them. They gross me out a lot. I don't think there's anything I can share from here that isn't a spoiler, but here's a map. There's a map of the world. Volume 6 is Escape from Lucian. Here. It's pretty cool. Volume 7 is Firelight. Volume 8 is Supernova. And Volume 9 is Wayrider. And that was the conclusion of the series. Overall, I love this series. I think it is, first of all, absolutely fucking beautifully drawn, very inventive. I love the majority of the characters. I loved how creative this world is, how much it expanded, the different conflicts, the characters in the morally gray areas, the characters who they're more nuanced, there's more to them than meets the eye. Overall, yeah, I just really loved this. I love there's like a time traveling element to it and a little bit as well. Overall, just fantastic series, so much fun. Gets kind of emotional here and there as well. I will say there were a couple of points where things got a little bit Deus Ex Machina, or Emily herself kind of felt almost Mary Sue-ish, like she's so amazing, just pushes the bounds and so freaking amazing, but ultimately I still just really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. The art has shifted ever so slightly in here. Some of the things, I mean, he made this over a pretty long span, not like a super long, but a fairly longish amount of time. So the art of some of the characters are less harsh, and I don't know if that's because a reflection of like different places within this world that these characters are from, or if it's just the art kind of, his art just evolved a little bit more. I also found that to be kind of interesting. And yeah, the only downside I think to this book in general was that I wished there was more. Like, I was okay with the ending the way it was, but I was sad that this was the conclusion and there's nothing else. It felt like there could be something else, but there wasn't. So that was one downside, but loved this series. I highly, highly recommend it. See, overall, volume 1 was 4 stars, volume 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all 5 stars. Volume 6 was 4 stars, volume 7 was 5 stars, volume 8 was 4 stars, and volume 5 was 5 stars. So yeah, overall, just great time. Okay guys, so this video is going to be so freaking messy, and I am so sorry about that. I think I will have input the older clips first, but I covered a couple of the books that I read, and I believe at the beginning of the first clip I said that I was having trouble with the camera. I broke something off of the tripod by accident, and then the memory card was having a problem. That was a couple of days ago. I actually just uploaded everything to my laptop today, and I was just looking at the clips before I labeled them, and noticed that 3 of them in which I was struggling with the camera and also going through all of the books that I read. Yeah, most of them were not there. So you have already seen the classics I read, and you have seen the graphic novels I've read, but, oh, and you saw the mystery that I read, but you haven't seen anything else, so now I have to do it again. So, yeah. Sorry that this video is all over the place, the lighting changes, my clothing changes, everything changes. I'm so sorry. February has been a struggle bus, and March is just continuing the same way. So, yeah, here we go. What else did I read? I read a romance novel, 2 poetry collections, 2 fantasy, and 1 book that I'm classifying as literary fiction, but it has fantastical element to it, so yeah. Let's go into the romance first. I read Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. This is the first book in the Reluctant Royal series, and this is actually a reread. I read this series for the first time in 2020 and really loved it. I was planning originally, because I just felt like I was in the mood to reread this series. I have not read it since 2020, and I was like, you know, it's about time for it. So I started the reread, but I have not continued with the series at this point. It's nothing to do with the reread of the series. It's still really good. It's just me. First book in the series is following Nalidi. She is very involved in STEM. She's actually working on her... is it her master's or her doctorate? Something like that. She has been working very long. She wants to be an epidemiologist, and she has a hard time trusting people and really letting people in. Her parents died when she was very young. She barely remembers them, and she was kind of shuttled around in the foster care system for a long time, and she's very used to relying on herself and working very hard to get shit done. Like I said, she is studying to be an epidemiologist, and she begins to get these emails from this prince of a country in Africa that she's barely even heard of, and she thinks it's one of those scams, you know, that Nigerian prince scam that everybody was doing like several years ago. She just kind of assumes it's something like that. It's not. Actually, due to her having taken one of those like ancestry tests, DNA things, she popped up on a search, and the assistant to Prince Labiso of the Solo, which is a fictional small country in Africa, he has been searching for his betrothed. When they were toddlers, the 2 of them became betrothed, and then her parents took her to America and just disappeared. Now obviously they passed, but basically the Biso's parents want to prepare him for rule, and they want him to get married and choose somebody else, but the Biso is holding on to this fairy tale hope that his betrothed is still out there and he can hopefully marry her. So with the help of his assistant, he goes to America to track her down, finds her, and is like, no, she's awesome. I definitely want to be with her. I want to find out why she never returned to the Solo. Unfortunately, he does this through some subterfuge by pretending that he is somebody else. Things get kind of complicated from there. I really enjoy this. I mean, I enjoyed this at the time, and I really liked it now as well. I love the humor that's in here. I love the banter between characters. I liked getting a closer look at like the field of STEM, of what it's like to, you know, basically be groomed to rule a small country. I really liked the cast of, well, not all of the cast of characters, but I enjoyed most of them. The spicy scenes are indeed spicy, and I do have to say that I don't think I really like Naledi that much. She's much like a prickly cactus, and I kind of understand why she's that way, but the constant like standoffishness was just like a little bit grating to me. I don't really, it's not something I enjoy too much in romance novels when people are just purposely making life more difficult for themselves. I don't, and adding more conflict than needed. I didn't enjoy that, but at the same time, I understand where she's coming from, because she's had a rough time, and then this guy who's nice to her ends up lying to her, and things are really complicated. I did enjoy overall the story, and something that I really liked about this series in 2020 was the fact that it was such a other than the lying thing, it was such a healthy relationship. Not that there's anything wrong with like toxic relationships in romance novels, the darker stuff and everything. You know, if that's your cup of tea, I'm so happy for you. For me personally, I don't really like that, because it ends up just really stressing me out. So I don't really go for a lot of that. So when I picked this up originally, I had been seeking out a lot of different romance novels and reading some older ones from like the 80s and stuff, and just I was not having a good time at the time, because a lot of the men were very sexist and misogynistic and possessive, and that's just not my cup of tea, and the women were like weak little drips, and it was very annoying, and I didn't really like it. So when I found this series originally and found this is like, besides like the lying aspect of it, for the most part this was based on like consent and mutual respect, and like a, you know, I love this like growing over time and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that. I found this to be a breath of fresh air at the time, and that's pretty much how I felt about it this time around now. I really like this kind of consenting adult romance thing, I guess, where it's, yeah, it's more about like respect. We're having spicy times, but we're checking in first. Are you really okay with us having spicy times? Okay, we're going for it. I just kind of like that. I think sometimes that it can be a little bit in your face and almost take you out of it, but in like this instance, how the spicy scenes were written and how things were handled, I think it was done very smoothly, and there was no like ridiculous metaphors during the scenes either, which, I mean, those are a hit and a miss when those are written into spicy scenes. You know, sometimes they're alright and then sometimes they're laughable, but there was none of that in here, so that was an added bonus if you're someone who doesn't really like the metaphorical spicy scenes either. But yeah, I just overall really enjoyed it. I like that we get the two differing point of views. I enjoy, like I said, the look more into STEM and also the royal side of things, and that's something that I really remember liking about the other stuff as well, the deep dives into people's careers, what they're involved in, everything like that. I think that's very well done as well. So yeah, overall had a really good time rereading this. But yeah, this was a 5-star originally, and it's still a 5-star. Okay, other things that I read 2 poetry collections, the first of which was Good Poems for Hard Times, and this is selected and introduced by Garrison Keillor. So, I own Good Poems, which is your standard poetry collection. I'm sure a lot of people have probably read that one or read stuff out of that one. I didn't know that Garrison Keillor had done any other selected poems for this, so I decided to pick up this one, especially because I've been in a place. This was not helpful. I can tell you right off the bat, this is not a collection that is conducive to bringing you to a happier place. That's kind of what I was assuming. Maybe I was stupid for making that assumption, that this would be kind of uplifting. This was not. This was a continuation of depression. A lot of poets' works in here. W.H. Auden, Hilaire Belloc, Wendell Berry, John Berryman, Elizabeth Bishop, William Blake, Philip Booth, Charles Bukowski, Robert Burns, Raymond Carver, Billy Collins, Rita Dove. It's like a lot of people. Several of them I have heard before. Some of the poems, actually I think only like one or two of the poems were ones that I'd read before. Everything else was new to me. I'd recognize some of the poets because I've read some of their other works before, and then a lot of them were new to me. I think if I read this how you're supposed to read poetry, supposed to, I think most of the time how you're supposed to read poetry is you're supposed to savor it. You're supposed to probably read a poem, sit with it for a while, move on to the next poem, or maybe do a poem a day or something, like, so you ruminate on it. That's not how I go. I'm a slam bam all the way through, ma'am. I tend to read them like I read any other books, and maybe that's partly a me thing, maybe it's because of my current headspace and everything like that, but I did not find this particularly good for me at this time. I found it to be actually detrimental. It was not, yeah, like I said, it was not very uplifting. It didn't make me feel better. It actually made me feel worse. Reading a lot of these are really depressing. The majority of the collection is just incredibly depressing. So I would say, if you're the type of person who, if you are mentally not doing well, but you feel better when you read things that are depressing, I think this is the collection for you. If you are like me, and reading things that are depressing when you're already upset is not how you like to live, don't. Wait until you're in a better mood. Yeah, so I might have been harsh by giving this collection overall 3 stars because of my current status. So maybe I'll come back to this at some point. There were a couple of poems that I did enjoy, and I did mark them as ones that I enjoyed. But for the most part, it was a depressing slog. So, yeah. Then the second collection that I read was The Trouble with Poetry and Other Poems, and this is by Billy Collins. I really enjoy Billy Collins' poetry. I find him to be really accessible. While he does use metaphors and different things, he's not as flowery with stuff. He tends to mostly stick more to the point, and a lot of his poems, in fact, he has a couple that he almost tongue-in-cheek breakdown of poets and how they work in poetry and how ridiculous it can be. It's more than once that he mentions, especially even in here, as a poet, standing by your window and looking outside and scribbling down things and just kind of watching the world go by and waiting until something comes to your mind, about some scene that you've witnessed between people or animals or nature, and then you relate it back to something mental, emotional, some other kind of thing, and then create a poem out of it. He dives into that a lot, which is, I think, very fun sometimes to see. And he, like I said, he can have like a tongue-in-cheek sense of humor about the strict rules of poetry and stuff like that. So yeah, I really for the most part, enjoy his works. This collection is pretty good. This collection overall covers a lot of different stuff. It goes into like childhood a little bit. It talks about the passage of time. Actually, the passage of time is a pretty big theme, I think, overall in this one. And he also, like I said, talks about writing. And while I will say I think my favorite collection of his is probably still Sailing Alone Around the Room, maybe The Rain in Portugal, I did still really enjoy this collection. I gave this 4 stars. Then I had my fantasy novels that I read, the first of which was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I reread this, I think I mentioned in my January wrap-up. Originally, I was only planning on doing a reread of the first book just because that's what I felt like at the beginning of the year, and then I decided, you know what, it has been a long time since I've read most of them. Let's do it. Let's just do a reread of the whole series. We'll space them out, 1 per month pretty much. So that's where I was at with this. I reread book 2 in February. Had mostly a good time rereading it. It is really readable. You know, it is a very readable book. It feels very comfortable slipping back into the rhythm of the story and the characters and everything. I, of course, did not like the part with the spiders because why is it always bloody spiders? But I overall pretty much enjoyed it. Again, what I'm finding over the reading of the 2 is that there's still a lot of nostalgia there for the series, because this was something that I invested so much of my time and heart into growing up, but looking at it more objectively as an adult, having read more fantasy, especially more middle grade fantasy, that's frankly better written. There were some instances where I was like, oh, that's kind of a plot hole, isn't that? Or, wow, they could have solved things easier if they just done this, huh? Like that kind of thing. I'm picking up more on that, which is, I will say, I don't think ruining the experience of the reread, because like I said, they're still very readable. There's still something very comfortable about reading them, but I'm just looking at it, I guess, in a different way now. So yeah, that was my reread of that. The other fantasy novel that I read was The Hobbit by Tolkien. I finished it. I mostly listened to the dramatized audiobook, but with the last, I don't know, 4 chapters, I want to say. Yeah, I think it was like the last 3 or 4 chapters. I saw how much time it would take for me to listen to the audiobook, and I knew how fast I could get through it otherwise, myself reading it, and I was like, you know what, I'm enjoying the audiobook, but I just want to finish this book. I just need to get I want to see how this ends. I just need to get through it. So I actually picked up the physical copy and finished the last few chapters myself. If you don't know what The Hobbit is about, that's insane. But the Hobbit is basically following Bilbo Baggins, who is a hobbit, which is basically a smallish humanoid person who, what would I say? He's technically smaller than the dwarves, isn't he? Yeah, I guess he's like a halfling size, if I don't know, my D&D is not very accurate either. Anyway, he's very small. Hobbits are fairly small. They like the lap of luxury. They like being very comfortable and happy and peaceful. They have hairy feet. They eat like, what, 7 meals a day. Basically, Bilbo himself, being a Baggins, he is a more well-to-do hobbit in the area, which is called the Shire. And his home is one of the best hobbit holes in the area, and just very nice. Like I said, comfort is the key thing, and Bilbo is very happy where he is. But then Gandalf the wizard returns, and Bilbo had really loved Gandalf. Most of the young people in the Shire love Gandalf, or have loved Gandalf, because he's fun. He brings with him various stories of adventures. He lets off fireworks. He can do cool bubble tricks with his smoke tricks with his pipe and things like that. He's a very fascinating dude. And so Bilbo initially is pretty excited that he's back, to, you know, talk with him and hang out and stuff like that. But then Gandalf pretty much is like, hey, you want to go on an adventure? And Bilbo's like, I really do not. But then in drags Gandalf with, I believe, 12 dwarves? 12 or 13 dwarves. I've read this over a span of time, so some of the certain amounts I can't quite remember, but he comes in with a lot of dwarves, and the dwarves are on a mission. The leader of them is Thorin Oakenshield, and he is the rightful heir to the mountain. Basically, this mine within the hills that was very rich. He's the rightful heir to that particular throne, I guess. His family and all the subsequent dwarves, they all used to work the mines and create armor and weaponry and the most beautiful jewelry and various things for a whole bunch of people. The elves, the humans, like everybody, they would like sell their wares and do a whole bunch of things with them. But then Smaug came, I believe like 100 or some odd years before Smaug, which is this evil dragon, showed up and basically decimated. The dwarves took over the mountain, ruined the town below, which they had close contact with, and yeah, basically moved in, took over their stores, and also added to the horde over time, and he's just been kind of ruling and making life terrible over there. So Thorin's like, enough's enough, we're fucking going, and they need assistance on their journey, and Gandalf has put up Bilbo as the burglar for them, because they can't fight Smaug, so the best way is to burgle, sneak in and try to see what the situation is and try to steal some of their things back. Bilbo is like, I'm not a burglar, but through some trickery and manipulation, Gandalf gets him to go along with the journey. That's basically, this is their journey there and back again, to over everything to the Misty Mountains and to the mountain, the aftermath of everything. Fun. I really found this to be overall really fun. I think the audiobook really helped out a lot initially, because I think I've said before, but I have DNF'd this book probably 4 or 5 times. Same goes for Fellowship of the Ring. I've never been able to actually read this series. I haven't seen the Hobbit movies. I have seen all the Lord of the Rings movies, but that was like years ago. And I really enjoy them. But yeah, I never read the books. Didn't think I'd ever be able to read the books, but I actually really enjoyed this. And I think the audiobook helped in such a way because it has a pretty good cast. I think there's honestly only like maybe 2 or 3 guys doing everything, doing all the voices for all the characters, but it was still really enjoyable. There's sound effects, there's music. I think that's really helpful too because the songs actually are sung in here. They're actually performed, and I think that's something that has always been was a little bit harder for me when I was trying to read this anyway, was like the musical parts and the varying things like that. It's just kind of like, whatever. But I really enjoyed it through the audiobook. I will say one part that I did not particularly enjoy and was also the part that was the hardest to get through in the audiobook was spiders. I don't think it's a spoiler to tell you that there are giant fucking spiders in here, because in a lot of fantasy novels there always seems to be giant fucking spiders somewhere. And you will know if you've, again, read this, if you've seen the movies, or if you know anything about Lord of the Rings, there's also giant fucking spiders in one of those books. Yeah, giant, I did not, that was my least favorite. Why was it my least favorite? Well, it would have been terrible anyway, just the descriptions of things, if it were not for the fact that, like I said, this has, sound effects. The sound effects that they chose for, these guys, oh my god. Just thinking about it, you probably can't tell, but all the hairs are standing up on my arms right now, just remembering it. Oh, it's awful. It is unpleasant. So I will say, if you have arachnophobia like I do, you'll probably not like that chapter. And if you're listening to the audiobook, I would suggest maybe reading the physical chapter for that instead of listening to the audiobook, because it is fucking pleasant. Otherwise, yeah, I really enjoyed this. There's humorous bits in here. I really liked, I will say, I think the majority of the characters that were introduced. Bilbo definitely grew on me. I didn't know what to think about him in the beginning. I thought he was a little bit kind of boring and snobbish, but then as it went along, he did kind of grow on me. He does show some bravery, he has some character growth, and the more I was thinking about it, I was like, why am I getting mad at him? If I had a very comfortable hobbit hole, which I have tried, I think, to make our home a very comfortable hobbit hole in a sense, would I very much like to be tricked into an adventure and dragged around and, you know, not know when I'm gonna eat next, or be very hungry and be cold and wet and tired and sore and everything? Would I want to do that for like months on end? No, I fucking wouldn't. So I really don't blame him for being grumpy or complaining for a lot of the book, because personally, if I'm hungry, I am terrible. I get to be very hangry. I am very uncomfortable to be around, which is why most of the time I try to carry a granola bar around with me, because if I can literally feel myself getting more agitated, and I will stop to take a break and eat something, because I know that why I'm getting agitated is because I am hungry. So, totally get it, totally understand, would definitely 100% would probably be bitchier than him, to be completely honest. So I get it. But yeah, I enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. I'm a little nervous about starting the Fellowship of the Ring, just because, you know, have tried, like I said, have tried to read it a few times, and also the writing is smaller than in here, and it's also a thicker book. But I'm hopeful, because I did really enjoy this a lot. I did find this to be really fun. So, yeah. As far as the score goes, I guess, for books that I said I would never read, and me revisiting them, I guess at this point, here's another score for I actually really liked it. So, and then the next book really that I read was Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and this is by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is a book about a coffee shop, very interesting coffee shop in Tokyo. It is a basement level coffee shop. It's really hard in there to tell what time of day it is because, like I said, it's basement level, there's no windows, it has a very retro feel to it, there's 3 clocks on the wall. It's a very small shop, there's like a counter with a few seats and there's a couple of tables. But it has a reputation, a little bit of an urban legend surrounding it, and that is that there is a particular seat that you can sit at in the coffee shop where it will allow you to travel through time. And there are certain rules to this coffee shop, different things that you are allowed, and basically the rules are you can go back in time to maybe speak with other people, but it has to be a time within the coffee shop that you were there with that other person, and you can only be there and experience this at a limited time, and you need to basically do this time travel thing and deal with everything and then drink up the coffee that you were served before the coffee gets cold, or you will not have a good time. This is a very interesting story. See, it's like I guess kind of like vignettes, but everything's interconnected. It's broken up into a couple of different chapters, heavily focusing on certain characters and kind of like their experiences with this time travel element in this shop. This was such an interesting book. So I really like time travel in stories for the most part. Like it's something that I very much enjoy. I mean, my favorite movie of all time is Back to the Future, so that shouldn't be surprising that I enjoy time travel, but this is honestly the most unique version of time travel that I've read about or experienced at all. Because it almost seems, and it says within the book too, so it's not me being rude, but it's almost has like a pointless feel to it, because you're not affecting anything. Whatever you do in this time travel, you're not changing anything. It's not like your standard, like Back to the Future, don't fuck with the space-time continuum, or Doctor Who, it's all wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, you can't, like, you're gonna affect things, but try not to fuck with them too much. There's fixed points in history, don't mess with them. Like, that kind of idea that I think is largely in a lot of, if not most, of time travel movies, shows, stories, things like that. This is an instance in which it's like that it's almost pointless because no matter what you do, it doesn't really seem to have an effect on things. But that's not the ultimate point. The point of the time travel is more about what it is doing for that individual who has decided to take this risk and try to go back to a time in their own personal history within this coffee shop. And it's more about them facing things, making decisions, getting closure, like it's very kind of a emotional time travel, really, than anything else, even though you are physically going back. But it's like that kind of sense. And that, honestly, like I said, is very unique. Like, I have not read anything like that before. Very quirky book, very interesting. So overall, I really enjoyed this. Also very emotional read, but maybe because of where I'm at currently, for some reason this didn't hit me as hard as it probably would have normally. But I did enjoy all those elements to it. There's a little bit of humor too here and there, but mostly just very interesting. One aspect of it that I did not particularly enjoy was a little bit of the writing style. There's just a little bit of confusion here and there with the way things are kind of spaced out on the page, where it's mostly dialogue scenes is where I'm talking about it. So there'll be a character that, like, so there's a line of dialogue, and then you go down and it says, well, this character gestured, or this character did a thing, and there's another line of dialogue, and then there's more dialogue under that, and you continue on, you're like, wait, what? Because instead of normally in a book, when you have things separated with this character gestured, or this character looked over here, or this character did the thing, and then you have a line of dialogue right next to it, normally that is a line of dialogue that is said by that particular character. That's not the case in here. It actually seems to be just weirdly spaced with like dialogue. Oh, but that's dialogue that actually belongs to this other character that spoke that other line of dialogue up here, and not, and then it's weird, and I don't know if that is due to the translation, or if that's due to just if there is a writing difference in Japan, how they space things out like that, if there is a difference, if that's just how books kind of are in Japan, as opposed to how books are in the Western world, maybe, or something. I don't know, it's just very, it took me out of it a bit, because there were some times where I'm reading the dialogue and then I'm like, wait, who said what? And I had to go back and read it a couple more times to understand, oh, so this one said, oh, okay. So it was just a little bit confusing and took me out of the book a little bit. Like I said, I don't know if that's, I can't fully fault the book for it, because it might be a translation thing, or it might just be culturally different way of spacing things out in a book that I'm not used to, because maybe we do things differently in the West as opposed to the East or Japan or whatever. Again, I don't know. I've only, besides manga, I've only ever read one other Japanese work before, and I can't remember if this was also an issue with that, but I do know that I had a little bit of trouble sometimes with how things were phrased and stuff like that on the page, so maybe it's just a difference in how things are worded in Japan. I'm not sure, but other than that, I think this is such a very quick read, but a very meaningful read as well. And like I said, if you're into time travel and you're interested in looking at quirky versions of time travel, I think this is a pretty good one to pick up. So yeah, I gave this like 4 stars. I also just realized that I don't think I fully went into all of the books that I started in February, and am continuing. I think I started to talk about them and then just never caught further in there, because again, the frickin' video did something dumb. The first one of these, I think I mentioned it, was The Ever-Cruel Kingdom. I did not get that far into it. It's book 2 in the Never Tilting World duology. I'm only a couple of chapters in, so I didn't get that far. My lunchtime read was Homework by Julie Andrews, which is a memoir, like she said, of her Hollywood years. This is actually her second memoir. I guess she has another one called Home, which covers her childhood, but you don't really need to read it in depth, I guess, because she does like have an introduction in here where she basically summarizes everything that was in that. So I'm still doing, I actually just remembered that I definitely 100% forgot to mention this book in my spring TBR, but in February I started doing a buddy read with Graz over the GKBC, and we are reading Don Quixote by Cervantes, and we are several chapters in. We're probably going to be plugging along with this until sometime in April, and so far, very interesting. Of course, any other version I've seen of this book has been video stuff, so like I've said before, I think the Wishbone episode, Don Quixote, watched that a lot growing up, because PBS would have reruns, so, and then Men of La Mancha, which I really loved as a kid, so, didn't know the full background of everything. This is utterly ridiculous. Like, just utterly ridiculous. I'm really glad that we're going we've been going like a chapter a day kind of deal, although I've recently been trying to catch up and read multiple ones because I got a little behind. But yeah, it's I'm really glad we're doing a chapter a day. Just even though it's like absolutely ridiculous, I'm really enjoying it. The writing style is just so old that it takes a lot to read it and get through it. So really glad that we're taking it in pieces, and also that I have a buddy to read with. So it's like motivation. Um, really funny, like funnier than you would expect. Just ridiculous. And then what else did I start? I also started, oh yeah, I started reading Hamlet by Shakespeare because, I don't know, when I'm in a mood, like a big mood, for some reason, I just end up rereading Hamlet. Did not get that far in this reread. Only like in the first act. I'll probably continue the reread, I imagine. I have to be very careful with this copy now, because unfortunately some of the pages are falling out. But yeah. And I also did a continuation of my books that I said I would never read. Am I too judgy? Thing. I started an audiobook and an ebook. I have started an audiobook of The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I am 25-30 minutes into that, and I don't know, guys. I think that one might end up being a DNF because I don't give a shit. But I'm gonna try to slog along for a little bit longer with that. So yeah, gonna give it the whole college try. And then I also I started an ebook of The Night Circus by, what is that, Aaron Morgenstern, I believe. It's, I don't know. There were a couple of things that happened that I was like, I don't want to fucking read this anymore. But I'm still, like, interested a little bit to see what happens when the two main characters meet up. So I'll probably stick around at least for that, and that will determine maybe if I care enough to continue reading that. I don't know. We'll see. The trouble with that one is that it's not a writing style that I'm particularly into. I don't really like overly flowery writing that much. So iffy about it. But yeah, I started that in February. I kind of paused in it for the moment, but I'll probably get back to it and see, like I said, where things go. But otherwise, yeah, that was everything that I have been reading or that I read in February. No DNFs so far. We'll see what happens in March. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry that everything's, like I said, disconnected visually and everything, but this is where we're at. Thank you guys anyway so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you are new here and would like to subscribe, please consider doing so, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.